All right, guys, it's true crime time again. I'm Ryan Nix.
And I'm Taylor Lynch.
And we're your hosts for Pure Malice, a true crime podcast.
Disclaimer, the information shared in this podcast or on this website is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The host will not be held responsible for any misled interpretation of the contents. The opinions and views expressed are those of the host and guests and should not be considered advice. We cannot guarantee the accuracy of any statements from guests or the sufficiency of the information. Trigger warning, discussion about violent crimes committed against children.
Self-care isn't just a luxury, it's a necessity. At Vital Flow Aesthetics and Wellness, they believe in helping you look and feel your absolute best. Whether you're looking for a rejuvenating medical-grade facial, Botox, fillers, or help on your weight loss journey, their expert team is there to enhance your natural beauty with personalized care. Ready to glow from the inside out? Book your appointment today at Vital Flow Aesthetics and Wellness and experience the confidence you deserve. Located inside Tejas Urgent Care in Mejia, Texas. Call or text now to book your appointment at 254-310-7131. Again, that's 254-310-7131.
I got a really cool new mic, guys. But the problem with it is I sound like I'm being flooded underwater with a sinus infection, and I don't have any of the three going on. What up, party people?
That was actually really cute. Okay. All right, guys, we're back. So Taylor's going to give a quick recap.
As you guys recall from last week, we're talking about the Girl Scout murders that happened in Oklahoma in 1977. We kind of went through the basic setup at camp. We went through and talked about each one of the girls, gave you light into like their personality, gave you some understanding of what each girl was like. Then we moved on to the actual event that happened. After we talked about the lack of security and lack of the gate, it was literally the worst gate in the world. We ended on talking about the crime scene, how they notified the parents, and the suspects that Sheriff Weaver zoned in on.
I'm going to zoom in.
Blind.
I am blind.
Also, if we ever do a reader letter write-in, we would prefer 18 font.
I know that's right.
18 font.
Yes.
And the word Pitifa. It can be PDF. It can be a Word document. I don't really care what's attached.
Nope.
As long as I can change it to like 18.
18 or bigger, man. All right. So picking back up where Sheriff Weaver has zoned in on Jean Leroy Hart, and he was 100% positive that he was the killer. So at this point, a full-blown manhunt was on for him. He had already eluded Sheriff Weaver before. He escaped prison 2 times, and both of them were on his watch. He's also a known rapist and an attempted killer. And you'll see in this episode that Sheriff Weaver seems to just have it out for him. And it seems like he allowed it to cloud his judgment. I think that there were a couple of major errors he made on this case because of his vengeance for Jean Leroy Hart and wanting to move it along. So they have not found Jean at this point. They brought in the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigations. They said that they found 3 fingerprints on the bodies, and there were a couple more fingerprints found in the tent, but that they were smudgy. So they were going to see if anything could be done with those. They also found a piece of black hair that was kind of stuck in the tape that was used to bind the girls, but they couldn't really do anything at that time with this. But eventually, they would be able to. So really, at this point, it just doesn't help. Jean was 33 at the time of the murders. He was a football star at Locust Grove High School. All of his teachers and his coaches said that they couldn't believe he turned into the kind of person that he did, because in high school, he was kind, sweet, he was well-mannered, a great-looking guy, he was a great listener, and he was also known as a great woodsman. He especially knew the land of this area where the murders took place extremely well because he'd grown up there on that land. So on June 23rd of 1977, a farm owner named Jack Schroff saw a man matching Hart's description sitting in a cave just 2 miles west of Camp Scott. And keep in mind that there are a ton of caves all through this area, even some that investigators did not know existed. So the farmer was walking the perimeter of his own farm and he spotted this man sitting under a cave and he immediately went back to his house and called the police. But by the time the police got there, the man was gone. Whenever police looked through the cave, they found some things that were notable. Officer Harvey Pratt was on the scene for this and he was Native American. And this is important because he said that he noticed there was a formation in the cave consisting of 4 small fires, well, the ashes from them. But he said that they were lit with cedar wood, which is important, and there were several cigarettes with the filters torn off in the middle of the fires. Officer Pratt says that these were indicative of some kind of ceremony, which tells him it's someone who's familiar with the Native American culture and knowing how to do the things for that ceremony. The saliva was taken and processed from the cigarette butts, and it was type O blood, which Hart had type O blood. They also found a boot print in the cave, which matched the boot print that was found inside of the tent. Same pattern and same size, which was 9.5. The problem with this is that Hart wore a size 11 boot, which screams to me that there was more than likely another perpetrator involved. So at this point, everyone is sent out of Camp Scott. They felt that they had collected all the evidence possible. So they took all of law enforcement out, but they wanted to keep the scene preserved. They didn't want people walking through the area, so they went ahead and hired a security company who set up there to watch the area. And while the security company was there were a lot of things that happened which are notable. They said that they would see a bunch of fresh footprints in the area and they would hear things. So they did believe that someone was still kind of stalking that area. Doors were left open that had previously been shut. They would see silhouettes of people in the woods. And whenever they would see the silhouettes, they would send out tracking dogs and they would follow the trail of a scent and then it would just stop.
Did they say what the scent was?
The dogs,
Just kidding.
yeah, it was Jean Leroy.
I thought we can cut that. I was thinking that you said, like, the security guard could track a scent, so I was like, "Oh, cigarette smoke."
Oh, no, the dogs.
Oh, the dogs.
Yeah, the
Okay, back
dogs.
to the dog.
Okay.
My bad.
And she said I was the slow one.
And my slowness will get cut out.
Or will it? Okay. So obviously, it could have been an outdoorsman who knew how to cover his scent. There was one incident when they let the dogs go ahead of them to follow the scent, and the dogs returned to them very shaken up and appeared to be bludgeoned on the head by someone. They never found who did this. They also started putting string through the trees and the trails so that they could tell if someone had been walking around in that area. And some of the threads of string were found to be broken. Also, the guards had set up to watch the main area of the camp in the director's office. And one night, the guards were startled by something in the woods. They believed it was a man, so they went out to check it, but couldn't find anything. However, whenever they returned, they noticed that on the front steps of the camp director's office, there was a bag with something inside. This bag was not there whenever they left. So, of course, the guards open it and dun dun dun. Whenever they opened it, inside was a soaking wet pair of little girl shoes with pink socks inside of them. And inside of those shoes, they found a handwritten name, Denise Milner. Denise's mother confirmed that those were her shoes and that they were not in the items returned to her.
That right there is just super creepy.
It's extremely creepy. It's messed up.
Like, somebody is literally playing and toying
Taunting.
up
And
with
I mean,
what
that's
happened.
a sick person.
Yeah. Even if they just found them, which I feel like nobody would just find them and do that. There's gotta be a
Person.
connection to
Yeah,
that.
any other person who would have found them would have seen the
But
name, known the name, and taken those and turned them into the police station.
it's also crazy to me that the security guards and everybody, like, at that campsite should have so many witnesses but never be able to track
Never.
somebody. But it also makes you wonder if there's multiple people at one time moving around, and that's why they can't track it.
Which is a great thought because they already think that there's possibly more than one person
Mhm.
involved here. So, yeah, definitely that could
Like,
be
'cause
part of
they
it.
could have been throwing them off in one direction to get the other one to be able to complete something else, which
Mhm.
that's so twisted.
So, this had to be the killer. They literally had to barely miss him for him to actually have left those there. There's also an article that was written by the Tulsa Tribune that was entitled, "Shoes Mysteriously Appear at Scott Death Scene." It says, Tom Kennedy, deputy director of the OSBI, said today that 2 pairs of shoes with Denise Milner's name on them are in the evidence files at the Oklahoma City office of the Crime Bureau. Any shoes that may have been found Thursday were not there the day that we originally investigated the case. I'm sure we have never seen these shoes before. They are not part of our evidence. So he basically was saying that they had already picked up all of the evidence. They picked up 2 pairs of her shoes that day on the scene. So these shoes that were left on the footsteps were not shoes that they had already collected. At some point, Sheriff Weaver announces to the press that they have a murder weapon. And the press wanted to know, what is this murder weapon that you have? He said it was the crowbar. However, the OSBI and the Oklahoma District Attorney said, no, we don't. We do not have a murder weapon. We don't know what he's talking about. There was no solid evidence that the crowbar was the actual weapon. Shortly after the DA, Sid Wise, came out and said that Sheriff Weaver was mistaken and that they don't have the murder weapon. In fact, they were never able to determine what the actual murder weapon was. The Wonder Dogs were sent out again to search for Hart's scent, and they hit on the pond on Jack Schroff's property, which is where Jean Leroy Hart had taken and left the pregnant women to die. So some of the parents joined in the search for the killer, specifically Richard Gousset, Michelle's dad. And later we'll see that he actually did really big things, not just here, but for the future of other crimes. He said at first that this experience really ruined him, but that he then took it and did really great things with it. So he really took part in this and said that he needed to be part of the people who took his daughter's killers down. So hundreds of volunteers searched the area on June 26th. They found something pretty interesting. This area was within a mile of Camp Scott, and they found 2 men's jackets, a t-shirt with rust-colored stains on it, and a pair of jeans, along with trash, beer, soda cans, and egg cartons. So it becomes clear that at least one man, but possibly more, are living in the area, or at very least camping out on this land right next to Camp Scott, and yet have remained completely undetected, even with dogs and everyone else around. So that kind of tells us that the entire time, no one had been checking out the areas around the camp all of these young girls were staying at. At various points in the manhunt, the reward for the capture of Jean Leroy Hart or any information were up and down. Girl Scouts around the U.S. actually raised around $15,000 for information. But at different times, the DA, Sid Wise, Sheriff Weaver, and OSBI all gave conflicting information about the suspects. Sid Wise said at one point that there were no suspects, while Sheriff Weaver said that they had 1 suspect, and the OSBI said that there were 3 suspects. Sid Wise actually had to come out the very next day and say that they have 1 suspect. So, as you can see, it was a very confusing case for the general public and the media to keep up with. There are now reports coming from all over that people were seeing Jean Leroy Hart all over the camp. So now there's a huge search organized with over 200 law enforcement agents and 400 civilian volunteers. They were instructed that this was a search and not to bring weapons. Members of the American Indian Movement, AIM, came forward and monitored the situation. A lot of searchers ended up just being very drunk. They did bring weapons, and some actually ended up getting arrested for public intoxication or for having drugs on them. So maybe not the most productive thing.
I feel like that's just sad. You would think that you would have I don't know. I wonder back then what their check-in system was, how they credentialed these people, even the volunteers, did they
Mhm.
do background checks? Did they, I'm sure they didn't do any of that kind of stuff, but
And I think that at this point, I mean, there's so many people involved here, it would be hard to even do that with
mhm.
that many people. So who knows?
I mean, I don't even know what they do nowadays, but I feel like there's gotta be some sort of sign-in sheet, check-ins,
Some way
making
to
sure nobody
organize it.
has weapons, because people
Mhm.
get crazy.
Agreed, especially whenever there's kids as victims
Yeah.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
emotions and just escalated.
I agree. So whenever the search ended, there was nothing of significance that turned up. They ended up bringing in heat sensing technology, and the National Guard used it as they were flying above the area in helicopters. But unfortunately, there were so many caves throughout the area that people could hide. They could evade capture in these caves. So the FBI ended up sending out 40 agents to help in this investigation. They claimed that they had proof that Hart was in the area, and there were a few times that he was seen by people and dogs were sent out, but dogs could never find him. So on July 6th, the medical examiner said that the fingerprints found on the bodies were, in fact, not fingerprints. And this is whenever the director of OSBI said, I would say with certainty that Hart is guilty because I would not say with certainty that any person who has not yet been tried were guilty, but we do have a great deal of evidence in this case that points to his guilt. So then they had a man named Robert R. Phillips do a personality profile of the killer based on newspaper articles describing the scene and anything else that he could find. He said he felt that the killer of the girls at Camp Scott was a sadistic psychopath with sexual perversions who might repeat the heinous crime if not captured. Mentally, the killer could not tolerate the idea of rejection, and this rage overwhelmed him. The murderer was not feeble-minded. He knew right from wrong, and he did not act on impulse. He also said that the killer was cool, calm, and calculated, and probably kept the camp under surveillance. He came prepared with a flashlight, a blunt instrument, and tape, and was in complete control until he became caught up, which caused him to become careless. He said that the killer tried to bring order to the chaos with a futile attempt to wipe up blood in the tent, but something happened and he was frightened away, leaving behind his flashlight and other objects. So on September 22nd of 1977, two of the victims' parents filed a $3 million lawsuit against Camp Scott's Magic Empire Council. So we are going to return to this lawsuit later because it goes on for a long time and it's actually pretty frustrating. So while that's going on, about 10 months after the crimes, Agent Larry Bowles, who had been working with a Cherokee informant, was told by this informant that Hart was staying with a friend, a local medicine man named Sam Pigeon, in Crookston Hills, about 45 miles away from Camp Scott. The informant said that Pigeon truly believed Hart was being railroaded, and in particular, he, along with others in the community, thought Sheriff Weaver had a personal vendetta against him for evading him, and he just wanted to pin this on him. He said that he had been staying in a shack with Pigeon for about 8 months, which added up in the timeline. So on April 6th of 1978, 8 FBI agents stormed the home of Pigeon and took Jean Leroy Hart into custody without any issues. Whenever they took him, guess what he was wearing? Women's eyeglasses.
Oh.
Yes.
I wasn't expecting that. And actually, I've heard this case multiple times. And I don't think I've ever caught that.
That he was wearing them whenever he was arrested?
He was wearing them when he was actually arrested.
It's kind of like one of those things like, really? Because if you
Why
remember,
would you?
the women's eyeglasses are some of the items that were stolen from the camp. They were left at the scene, and they were also found in one of the caves that police went through.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a book called Somebody Cry for the Children, Larry Bowles said that whenever he arrested Hart and was leading him out to the shack, he said, "You killed those little girls, didn't you?" And Hart's reply was, "You'll never pin it on me." So this is where I think that Weaver started to kind of mess up. Something that's interesting is that they searched the home and found nothing of true significance. They decided to do a second search after he was arrested, and suddenly they found 2 items: a toy corncob pipe and a mirror. They were apparently stolen from one of the counselors at the camp, and it was stolen on the night that the murder happened. So he was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and pled not guilty. So he was initially taken to the state penitentiary of McAllister, Oklahoma, where he had been serving his prison term for first-degree rape before he escaped at the Mays County Jail in 1973.
Got him.
That's right. Self-care isn't just a luxury, it's a necessity. At Vital Flow Aesthetics and Wellness, they believe in helping you look and feel your absolute best. Whether you're looking for a rejuvenating medical-grade facial, Botox, fillers, or help on your weight loss journey, their expert team is there to enhance your natural beauty with personalized care. Ready to glow from the inside out? Book your appointment today at Vital Flow Aesthetics and Wellness and experience the confidence you deserve. Located inside Tejas Urgent Care in Mejia, Texas. Call or text now to book your appointment at 254-310-7100 7131. Again, that's 254-310-7131.
Disclaimer: the information shared in this podcast or on this website is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The host will not be held responsible for any misled interpretation of the contents. The opinions and views expressed are those of the host and guests and should not be considered advice. We cannot guarantee the accuracy of any statements from guests or the sufficiency of the information. Trigger warning: discussion about violent crimes committed against children.
They said that they would be seeking the death penalty if he was found guilty, and the trial began on March 9th of 1979. Right away, it was not going well for the prosecution. The DA, Wise, said they found out that he had signed a book contract with the editor of the prior Daily News, and he agreed to share case information for the book once the trial concluded. So he was not allowed to be on the case anymore, because obviously that's a conflict of interest. So he had to hand the case over to Tulsa County DA, Buddy Fallis. The Cherokee Nation Tribal Council actually donated $12,000 to Jean Leroy Hart's defense. They said that it wasn't because they thought that he was innocent. They said they didn't know if he was or not, but that they wanted to make sure that he received a fair trial and didn't think that he would without money to get a good defense team. Many people in the community did not believe that he did it. They liked him. He was very charismatic, especially in front of cameras. He was very likable. And at one point, there was a rumor that the pregnant women he raped were actually trying to get away from their husbands, and they willingly went with him. Willingly got into his trunk, had duct tape over their noses, their mouth. He left them to die in the woods.
Willingly, maybe they're into fetishes. I don't
Right?
know.
I don't know.
It's more plausible that he did it against their will
100%.
than they would agree. Even people who work in that line of work, I just don't see them being willing to be paid to follow out something that intense.
I mean, I feel like maybe some would, but I don't know.
Well, I feel like there's so much lack of control. Like, you can't control anything that's done to you.
With a complete stranger.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the key there. The complete stranger thing. Like, maybe
Yeah.
if you trusted them and I don't know, like it was a partnership. I don't know.
Yeah, it would be tough.
Yeah. I don't see that being a plausible answer of, oh, yeah, I let him do it. All the things, duct tape and putting me in the trunk, especially if I'm pregnant.
Agreed. And that's part of the problem with that whole thing is these women were pregnant.
Yeah.
Like, no, I highly doubt that.
Well, and that's like a very specific thing. You're doing this specifically, not to just one pregnant lady. You've had two.
Mm-hmm. So in the case for the three girls, they were not allowed to bring up the case involving the two pregnant women because it was a different case and it could have made the jury bias. I think it's relevant, but I guess it's understandable.
Yeah, like in the court of law, it's a whole different.
Yeah.
Because you have to think about it. Each crime is tried differently.
I know, but I still feel like jury should be able to know that he...
Yeah, like a past history or something.
Yes, past history.
But the fact that it was crimes and he was already gone through the legal process, that's where you can't bring it up anymore once you're convicted on it.
That's crazy.
Maybe I'm wrong in that, but I'm pretty sure.
No, I think you're right. I just don't agree with it.
Yeah, I don't think I agree with it either.
If you look at several other cases, they bring up people's past criminal history.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Which I guess that depends on if it's the same type of
Case by case.
crime. Well, I think if it's the same type of crime, it's same timeline,
All the million different things.
the specific details and how that applies to the current case. And then on top of that, if they were actually convicted or not, it would also depend on who the
If
judge
he allows
is, the
it.
county, all that.
He, she, yeah.
Yeah, they, them.
So in the trial, Hart was asked where he was the night of the murders, and he answered, "I was at my uncle's house in Tulsa." Prosecution said that they would have to speak with the uncle, and Hart told them he's dead. Prosecution then asked...
So hold on.
What?
Uncle's dead, just so happened to die before the trial.
His alibi died before the trial.
Did they check that out? Was that like legit? I wonder. I mean, I'm assuming they would have checked it out, but that's crazy.
Well, what prosecution did is they asked if anyone could collaborate.
Collaborate and listen.
Us is back with brand new edition.
Something.
Grabs
Got
a
a
hold
hold
of
of
me
me tightly, daily and nightly.
Okay. So prosecution then asked if anyone could corroborate that, and Hart said, "My uncle could have, but he's now not alive." So the physical evidence that prosecution had, which was the hair, the boot print, and the shoe print, the semen and fingerprints, It was all heavily debated during the trial because in the 70s, you have to remember that forensic science was not very advanced and people still did not really believe in the scientific side yet. So it was hard to be able to prove anything beyond circumstantial evidence here.
Yeah, that reasonable doubt would be there.
Yeah. So the hairs were looked at by a chemist for the defense, and they said it had a strong resemblance microscopically to Hart's hair, but they couldn't confirm it was from his head. There was also the issue of the boot and shoe print not matching his size of shoe, which the defense brought up and used as Hart was not at the crime scene. None of the fingerprints were able to be matched to Hart. So this brings us to the mirror and the toy corncob pipe that the prosecution said was found during the second search of the home that Hart had been staying in with Pigeon. The prosecution said that it was stolen from the camp. Well, the counselor that these items belonged to testified on the stand that these items were hers and said that they were in a trunk that she brought with her to camp. But she said that the trunk that those items were in were taken by police as evidence. And whenever the trunk was returned to her, those items were then missing from her trunk. So, according to her, the items had been in police custody and then suddenly ended up at the home that Hart was staying in. This did not come off well for prosecution. It definitely puts doubt into the jury's minds about law enforcement and how things were done during this case. It came back to Sheriff Weaver, and I believe that he planted the evidence.
If they really felt like they had such a strong case and multiple agencies felt like they had who it was and that it was a very strong case, then you wouldn't need to do that.
Right.
It also puts doubt in my mind that the authorities maybe known somebody else that it could have been and were protecting somebody. So many
Exactly.
different theories. Why plant evidence if you have strong enough evidence?
Agreed.
Unless this was also their plan all along.
But if you look at, at all the evidence they have, it was all circumstantial.
And I'm sure they were desperate at that point to do anything it took to make sure that they locked up who they thought it was.
So the semen that was found at the crime scene and on the bodies contained traces of sperm. The sperm was determined to be from a non-white male who had type O blood, which type O blood is rare. Again, so Hart, he was Native American. He had type O blood. So it did match to him. But the fact that sperm was found means that this man was capable of producing sperm. And Hart had a vasectomy, which was supposed to stop sperm from being ejaculated with the semen.
You also have people who have vasectomies that end up impregnating their wife. That to me is not enough to say it wasn't him, because that stuff happens all the time.
And you're right. And it was discovered by the prosecution that Hart's vasectomy failed and was only partially effective, meaning that he did produce sperm, but a large amount of his sperm was deformed and not likely to produce a child or a pregnancy. Whenever he was tested after the arrest, he did produce deformed sperm. And whenever the sperm at the crime scene were tested, they were also found to be deformed and not viable. So that's a pretty big...
that's damning evidence.
Yeah.
Right there.
I agree.
And if that's the case, why plant? Because that to me is beyond a reasonable doubt. That right there is the one thing that's enough in my mind. If I'm on that jury, you're getting convicted. But
Why
the fact
plant?
that you planted evidence, now he's going to be acquitted. Why even risk that chance?
Agreed. There was no reason, and you have a chance now to have blown the whole thing because the witness said, no, sorry, but that was not in the trunk that was given back to me, but it was in there originally. So no reason for it. The prosecution ended up bringing Larry Dry to the stand. He was a prisoner who had at one point escaped with Hart, and he testified that he and Hart had stayed at those caves together, and the cave where the most personal belongings had been found was only 100 feet from the foundation of Hart's childhood home. The defense also indicated another man in the crime, which eventually kind of fell apart. The man's name was William Stevens, who was a convicted kidnapper and rapist who was in prison in Kansas. His cellmate, Dwayne Peters, told OSBI that William admitted to him that he had committed the crimes. A woman named Joyce Payne, who was the mother of a friend of William Stevens, said that she saw the exact red 6-volt flashlight in his possession and then it had the pinhole. However, it was later found that Joyce Payne and Dwayne Peters had a little fling going and that they were both trying to get Stevens a lighter sentence for giving information in Hart's trial. So the semen evidence also did not match Stevens, but there was another part to this. And that part was where a waitress who lived in another town a while away, who said that the morning after the murders took place that she saw William Stevens in bloody clothes and in what seemed to be a stressed out state. He was not ever convicted in the case of the 3 girls. In an interview with the Oklahoman on June 14th of 2007, someone who remains anonymous said that they heard quite a bit of vehicular traffic on a remote road near the camp between 2:30 and 3 a.m. the night of the murders, and that nothing ever came of this. So Hart ended up being acquitted, and the jury returned a not guilty verdict in 7.5 hours over 2 days. They said that unfortunately, there is no physical evidence showing indefinitely that Hart was at the camp. They also pointed to the pictures that were found in the cave and that prosecution used in tying Hart to the cave that was within a mile of the camp. And one of the guards at the prison said that he had seen those exact photos on Sheriff Weaver's desk at one point. And Sheriff Weaver said no, he had Hart sign an evidence form stating that those pictures belonged to him. But in the end, the jury had too much doubt to convict Hart.
Mhm.
Supporters of Hart, they cheered in the courtroom whenever the verdict was read. And the families of the victims were there as well. And they said that whenever the verdict was read, they sat there completely numb and shocked hearing the not guilty verdict. And that around them, it was like there was a baseball game going on because of all the people cheering.
I feel like that would be a hard moment to, like, process. I mean, in the event that Hart was not guilty,
Mhm.
they did the right thing by returning that not guilty verdict. Well, then you still have families that are absolutely heartbroken and crushed, and they have to redo this potentially another time.
Lived through it all
And
over
they
again.
could have to live through it multiple times, or in this case, they'll never know what
Never
actually
know.
happened.
And I feel like that's worse. To me, that's
Yeah,
just
there's
worse.
no closure whatsoever. You leave it up to your imagination of who it was or what the reason was, and that to me is just heartbreaking and devastating.
Heart-wrenching for sure, and again, I don't think I would be able to handle not having any
Mm-mm.
kind of closure. That would be super hard. So, even though he was acquitted, he did still have to return to prison and complete his previous 305 years that he was sentenced to for the conviction of the rapes and the attempted murders of the 2 pregnant women. He ended up passing away on June 4th of 1979. He was lifting weights, went for a jog, and he died of a heart attack in the prison yard.
One way to go.
Lori Farmer's father said that the atmosphere was not hostile, but it wasn't far from it. In the courtroom, there was definitely subtle intimidation by Hart sympathizers. He also said that walking into local restaurants after the trial, you would see jars collecting funds for Hart. And earlier, I mentioned that 2 of the girls' families filed a civil lawsuit against Camp Scott's Magic Empire Council, and the families ended up losing in this lawsuit. During the lawsuit, they produced a number of events that put the campers of the camp being placed in danger. There were incidents of girls who found people in their tent who ran away whenever the girls came close, a man breaking into a cabin, but the girls screamed so loudly that they ran off, the threatening note that was found in the donut box, the slashed tents, and all of the other things that happened. Barbara Day, which again was the camp director in 1977, that was her first year to be director, and she said that she had no idea that there had been so many incidents that caused threats to the campers or those on the grounds, and that had she known, she wouldn't have accepted the position of director. Barbara Day and Dee Elder said both of them were in the dark about the previous incidents.
Which I could see that, like, that big of an organization, it being
Mhm.
very hush-hush,
Mhm. And
and
whenever you're a new director, they're not gonna tell you all of the bad stuff. They want you to
no.
take this position.
Yeah. But it does surprise me that they had so many campers willing to come back every year that had, been there multiple times, because you can't tell me that the campers don't hear these things. But I'm sure for the campers, being little and excited, part of it, like, ooh, the scary campfire stories, it doesn't really happen.
Well, that and counselors or other people in supervisory roles saying, "Oh, it's not a
Oh,
big
yeah, it's
deal,"
nothing,
playing
it
it
didn't
down, so they
happen.
just
Yeah.
washed it away because these are the adults
Yep,
telling
let's
them it was no big
sweep it
deal.
under the rug.
Mhm.
That figment of your imagination.
Yeah. So the victim's parents did appeal this decision, but the original judgment was upheld. In 1989, DNA testing had come a long way, and the DNA testing proved that 3 of the 5 were a match to Hart's DNA. And it showed that there was a 1 in 7,700 chance that it was a Native American man.
To me, that would be like, okay, there's some closure,
Mhm.
but it's not the same. They didn't get the justification of getting that determination.
Yeah. Then in 2016, 2017, the sheriff of Mays County started raising funds to do more DNA testing, and they have been doing that to try and get it retested. Haven't really found anything that's come out since then. The samples, though, were not stored well. And on top of that, the age of them. So we'll see.
Yeah.
But after all of this, the camp closed down and never reopened again. And the son of H.J. Scotty, who inherited all of this, said that he was not happy that the camp was closed. He thought it should have been reopened again.
Mm.
Mhm.
I don't know. I feel like there's too many incidents that happen, like, unless you're gonna have, like, a whole security gate.
Exactly. If you're going to completely up everything, then sure, go for it. But other than that, there's no way. There's a dark cloud over
As
that
a
whole
parent,
thing.
I would never send my kids there knowing the history of it at this
Nope.
point. Like, once this came out, like, you are done. Now, you wanna go open it somewhere else? Okay.
Yeah, a
Not
whole
there.
different place for sure. Earlier, we also mentioned that Richard Gousset, Michelle's father, that he did some really great things through all of this. He actually helped the state legislature pass the Oklahoma Crime Victims Bill of Rights, which basically made it where the families of victims know the procedures the entire way through the cases. It also states that the victim's family should be seated in a waiting area that never crosses paths with the defense team or a defendant. He also founded the Oklahoma Crime Victims Compensation Board. Her family never changed her bedroom at all. Sherry Farmer, Lori's mom, she actually ended up founding the Oklahoma chapter of the Parents of Murdered Children, which is a grief group. In the end, we still don't know exactly what happened or who all was involved. Don't know that we ever will, which is very unfortunate.
The whole thing is so crazy to me, and the evidence, and you can tell there were a lot of things that went wrong.
Mhm.
But what I will say in the very end of it, as horrible of a crime as this was, the fact that these parents, not that they were able to get past it, but they were able to grow from the negative experience and use it in a positive way to help other families. Being able to make lemonade out of lemons,
Mhm.
saying,
Mhm.
because you were dealt these cards that were just so unfortunate, but you made the best you could out of a traumatic situation.
Terrible, terrible situation. And yeah, I agree. At least they did move forward. And even though they didn't get full closure, maybe those things that they did gave them some peace of mind in the end.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in.
We'll see you next time.
I'm Taylor,
And I'm Ryan Nix,
and this is where we leave you. Come back next week for more
Pure Malice. A true crime podcast. Self-care isn't just a luxury, it's a necessity. At Vital Flow Aesthetics and Wellness, they believe in helping you look and feel your absolute best. Whether you're looking for a rejuvenating medical-grade facial, Botox, fillers, or help on your weight loss journey, their expert team is there to enhance your natural beauty with personalized care. Ready to glow from the inside out? Book your appointment today at Vital Flow Aesthetics and Wellness and experience the confidence you deserve. Located inside Tejas Urgent Care in Mejia, Texas. Call or text now to book your appointment at 254-310-7131. Again, that's 254-310-7131.